open to that, as I extricate myself from being identified with what I'm doing, it's just doing, then there is no karma for me in this act. This act is just it's old karma running off without my creating new karma. There's a very fine distinction of whether, if you're identifying with your action, you create more karma. If I think I'm doing something, I create karma. And then it is a cause for a subsequent effect. So in a sense, yes, it is all cause and effect from a certain place of looking. If you stand outside of time, it's all simultaneous. And it only seems sequential from where you're standing. You hear that one too?
You eliminate form.
Yeah, exactly. So cause and effect is still a relative term. And as is getting interesting in science, as they see the reverse way in which effect becomes cause for the cause which becomes effect. I mean, it starts to go backwards in time. That's what now the leading edge of science plays with. That'll really boggle the mind. Questions?
There are many of us here, I know, that are involved in the Course of Miracles, the wrong stuff. There are various things that are going on that are absolutely elevating. And sometimes I wonder if this is something that one should continue on and on in, perhaps repeating and constantly reaffirming these things, or whether it is better just to read, to get what you can, and then let go of it and know that it will be of benefit as you live, rather than studying and studying and studying.
I hear. Did that question come through all right? I bet I get feedback each time. Yes? All right, thank you. It depends on whether or not that particular form of yoga is your method, your primary method. If it is your method, like for example, I was working with the Bhagavad Gita, which is 18 chapters. I studied it for 5 years, every day. Every day I would read one chapter. When I got to the 18th, I'd start again. Every morning I read a chapter for 5 years. And I began to feel I was beginning to understand the beginning of it, all right? I mean, it just keeps opening up and opening up and opening up. And so if it is a method for you, you can keep doing it and coming back at deeper levels and deeper levels and deeper levels until you become it. Then you're done with it, all right? On the other hand, if it is not your method, you can pick it up. Whatever you're ripe to hear, you are, and then you can put it away. Maybe come at it some other time. See, then it's not your primary method. But if it's your primary method, just keep staying with it and staying with it and keep staying with it and staying with it. Is that dealing with the question?
That's fine. How do you know?
I think you learn to trust that intuitive place in you. And for example, sometimes when you're bored, you sense that you're bored because there's a defense in you that you'd like to break through and you'd like to go through the boredom. At other times, the boredom says, enough of this. And only you know that. And how do you know? You don't know you know, but there is an intuitive place, and you got to learn to trust that. And that takes some, because there's no external measuring thing. You can say, oh, this is that kind of boredom, and this is that kind of boredom. And so you get to trust. And this is very scary stuff, because you're in an uncharted realm in which you have a unique upaya. You have your method. It's not anybody else's. And you've got to listen. And for you, this is right on. And for you at another time, I go and sometimes somebody says, would you like to meet so? Oh, I'd love to meet them. At another time, they might say, would you like? No, I'm sorry. I really don't. And I trust that. I've learned to trust that more and more. And I'll pick up a book and read a paragraph and put it down. In other books, I study and underline and write and read. And I have no rational reason for that. I can't give you a reason. I just trust that there's something in me that is homing, a homing device that's picking up what I need to use. And a lot of people accuse me of being a rather sloppy, dilettante, and eclectic. And I honor the charge, but that's my route. What am I going to do? I can't be a phony about it. That's the way I'm working. I've got another one to add into the stew of Ramtha and Seth and all, which is
floods. The autumn floods had come. Thousands of wild torrents poured furiously into the Yellow River. It surged and flooded its banks until, looking across, you could not tell an ox from a horse on the other side. Then the river god laughed, delighted to think that all the beauty in the world had fallen into his keeping. So downstream he swung until he came to the ocean. There he looked out over the waves toward the empty horizon in the east, and his face fell. Gazing out at the far horizon, he came to his senses and murmured to the ocean god, "Well, the proverb is right. He who has got himself 100 ideas thinks he knows more than anybody else. Such a one am I. Only now do I see what they mean by expanse." The ocean god replied, "Can you talk about the sea to a frog in a well? Can you talk about the ice to dragonflies? Can you talk about the way of life to a doctor of philosophy? Of all the waters in the world, the ocean is greatest. All the rivers pour into it day and night. It is never filled. It gives back its water day and night. It is never emptied. In dry seasons, it is not lowered. In flood time, it does not rise. Greater than all other waters. There is no measure to tell how much greater. But am I proud of it? What am I under heaven? What am I without yang and yin? Compared with the sky, I am a little rock, a scrub oak on the mountainside. Shall I act as if I was something? Of all the beings that exist, and there are millions, man is only one. Among all the millions of men that live on earth, the civilized people that live by farming are only a small proportion. Small is still the number of those who, having office or fortune, travel by carriage or by boat. And of all these, one man in his carriage is nothing more than the tip of a hair on a horse's flank. Why then all the fuss about great men in great offices? Why all the disputations of scholars? Why all the wrangling of politicians? There are no fixed limits. Time does not stand still. Nothing endures. Nothing is final. You cannot lay hold of the end or the beginning. He who is wise sees near and far. As the same does not despise the small or value the great. Where all standards differ, how can you compare? With one glance he takes in past and present, without sorrow for the past or impatience with the present. All is in movement. He has experience of fullness and emptiness. He does not rejoice in success or lament in failure. The game is never over. Birth and death are even. The terms are not final. Great and small. When we look at things in the light of Tao, nothing is best, nothing is worst. Each thing seen in its own light stands out in its own way. It can seem to be better than what is compared with it on its own terms, but seen in terms of the whole, no one thing stands out as better. If you measure differences, what is greater than something else is great. Therefore there is nothing that is not great. What is smaller than something else is small. Therefore there is nothing that is not small. So the whole cosmos is a grain of rice, and the tip of a hair is as big as a mountain. Such is the relative view. You can break down walls with battering rams, but you cannot stop holes with them. All things have different uses. Fine horses can travel 100 miles a day, but they cannot catch mice like terriers or weasels. All creatures have gifts of their own. The white-horned owl can catch fleas at midnight and distinguish the tip of a hair. But in bright day it stares helpless, cannot even see a mountain. All things have varying capacities. Consequently, he who wants to have right without wrong, order without disorder, does not understand the principles of heaven and earth. He does not know how things hang together. Can a man cling only to heaven and know nothing of earth? They are correlative. To know one is to know the other. To refuse one is to refuse both. Can a man cling to the positive without any negative, in contrast to which it is seen to be positive? If he claims to do so, he is a rogue or a madman. Thrones pass from dynasty to dynasty. Now in this way, now in that. He who forces his way to power against the grain is called tyrant and usurper. He who moves with the stream of events is called a wise statesman. Quai, the one-legged dragon, is jealous of the centipede is jealous of the snake is jealous of the wind is jealous of the eye is jealous of the mind. Quai said to the centipede, I manage my one leg with difficulty. How can you manage 100? The centipede replied, I do not manage them. They land all over the place, like drops of spit. The centipede said to the snake, with all my feet, I cannot move as fast as you do with no feet at all. How is this done? The snake replied, I have a natural glide that can't be changed. What do I need with feet? The snake spoke to the wind. I ripple my backbone and move along in a bodily way. You without bones, without muscles, without method, blow from the North Sea to the Southern Ocean. How do you get there with nothing? The wind replied, True, I rise up in the North Sea and take myself without obstacle to the Southern Ocean. But every eye that remarks me, every wing that uses me is superior to me, even though I can uproot the biggest trees or overturn big buildings. The true conqueror is he who is not conquered by the multitude of the small. The mind is this conqueror, but only the mind of the wise man, the man of Tao, the man in whom Tao acts. Without impediment harms no other being by his actions, yet he does not know himself to be kind and to be gentle. The man in whom Tao acts without impediment does not bother with his own interests, and does not despise others who do. He does not struggle to make money, and does not make a virtue of poverty. He goes his way without relying on others, and does not pride himself on walking alone. While he does not follow the crowd, he won't complain of those who do. Rank and reward make no appeal to him. Disgrace and shame do not deter him. He is not always looking for right and wrong, always deciding yes or no. The ancients said therefore. The man of Tao remains unknown. Perfect virtue produces nothing. No self is true self, and the greatest man is nobody. The turtle, Shuangzi, with his bamboo pole, was fishing in Pu River. The Prince of Chu sent to vice-chancellors with a formal document, We hereby appoint you Prime Minister. Shuangzi held his bamboo pole, still watching Pu River. He said, I am told there is a sacred tortoise, offered and canonized 3,000 years ago, venerated by the prince wrapped in silk, in a precious shrine on an altar in the temple. What do you think? Is it better to give up one's life and leave a sacred shell as an object of cult in a cloud of incense 3,000 years? Or better to live as a plain turtle dragging its tail in the mud? For the turtle, said the vice-chancellor, better to live and drag its tail in the mud. Go home, said Shuangzi, leave me here to drag my tail in the mud. Owl and Phoenix, Huai Tzu was prime minister of Liang. He had what he believed to be inside information that Shuangzi coveted his post and was intriguing to supplant him. In fact, when Shuangzi came to visit Liang, the prime minister sent out the police to apprehend him. The police searched for him 3 days and 3 nights, but meanwhile Shuang presented himself before Huai Tzu of his own accord and said, Have you heard about the bird that lives in the south, the phoenix that never grows old? This undying phoenix rises out of the South Sea and flies to the sea of the north, never alighting, except on certain sacred trees. He will touch no food but the most exquisite rare fruit, drinks only from clearest springs. Once an owl, chewing a dead rat already half decayed, saw the phoenix fly over, looked up, and screeched with alarm, clutching the rat to himself in fear and dismay. Why so frantic, clinging to your ministry and screeching at me in dismay? The joy of fishes. Shuangzi and Huaizu were crossing Hao River by the dam. Shuang said, "See how free the fishes leap and dart. That is their happiness." Huai replied, "Since you are not a fish, how do you know what makes fishes happy?" Shuang said, "Since you are not I, how can you possibly know that I do not know what makes fishes happy?" Huai argued, "If I, not being you, cannot know what you know, it follows that you, not being a fish, cannot know what they know." Is happy. From the terms of your question, you evidently know I know what makes fishes happy. I know the joy of fishes in the river through my own joy as I go walking along the same river. Perfect joy. Is there to be found on earth a fullness of joy, or is there no such thing? Is there some way to make life fully worth living, or is this impossible? If there is such a way, how do you go about finding it? What should you try to do? What should you seek to avoid? What should be the goal in which your activity comes to rest? What should you accept? What should you refuse to accept? What should you love? What should you hate? What the world values is money, reputation, long life, achievement. What it counts as joy is health and comfort of body, good food, fine cloths, beautiful things to look at, pleasant music to listen to. What it condemns is lack of money, a low social rank, a reputation for being no good, and an early death. What it considers misfortune is bodily discomfort and labor, no chance to get your fill of good food, not having good clothes to wear, having no way to amuse or delight the eye, no pleasant music to listen to. If people find that they are deprived of these things, they go into a panic or fall into despair.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to VentureCapitalDomains.com, where a venture capital startup firm. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to VentureCapitalDomains.com, where
They are so concerned for their life that their anxiety makes life unbearable, even when they have the things that they think they want. The very concern for enjoyment makes them unhappy. The rich make life intolerable, driving themselves in order to get more and more money, which they cannot really use. In so doing, they are alienated from themselves and exhaust themselves in their own service as though they were slaves of others. The ambitious run day and night in pursuit of honors, constantly in anguish about the success of their plans, dreading the miscalculation that may wreck everything. Constantly in anguish about the success of their plans, dreading the miscalculation that may wreck everything. Thus they are alienated from themselves, exhausting the real life in service of a shadow created by their insatiable hope. The birth of a man is the birth of his sorrow. The longer he lives, the more stupid he becomes, because his anxiety to avoid unavoidable death becomes more and more acute. What bitterness! He lives for what is always out of reach. His thirst for survival in the future makes him incapable of living in the present. What about the self-sacrificing officials and scholars? They are honored by the world because they are good, upright, self-sacrificing men, yet their good character does not preserve them from unhappiness, nor even from ruin, disgrace, and death. I wonder, in that case, if their goodness is really so good after all. It is perhaps a source of unhappiness. Suppose you admit they are happy, but is it a happy thing to have a character and a career that led to one's own eventual destruction? On the other hand, can you call them unhappy, if in sacrificing themselves they save the lives and fortunes of others? Take the case of the minister who conscientiously and uprightly opposes an unjust decision of his king. Some say, tell the truth, and if the king will not listen, let him do what he likes. You have no further obligation. On the other hand, Zhu Shu continued to resist the unjust policy of his sovereign. He was consequently destroyed, but if he had not stood up for what he believed to be right, his name would not be held in honor. So there is the question, shall the course he took be called good, if at the same time it was fatal to him? I cannot tell if what the world considers happiness is happiness or not. All I know is that when I consider the way they go about attaining it, I see them carried away headlong, grim and obsessed in the general onrush of the human herd, unable to stop themselves or to change their direction. All the while they claim to be just on the point of attaining happiness. For my part, I cannot accept their standards, whether of happiness or unhappiness. I ask myself if after all their concept of happiness has any meaning whatever. My opinion is that you never find happiness until you stop looking for it. My greatest happiness consists precisely in doing nothing whatever that is calculated to obtain happiness, and this is in the minds of most people is the worst possible course. I will hold to the saying that perfect joy is to be without joy. Perfect praise is to be without praise. If you ask what ought to be done and what ought not to be done on earth in order to produce happiness, I answer that these questions do not have an answer. There is no way of determining such things. Yet at the same time, if I cease striving for happiness, the right and the wrong at once become apparent all by themselves. Contentment and well-being at once become impossible the moment you cease to act with them in view, and if you practice non-doing, why? You will have both happiness and well-being. Here is how I sum it up. Heaven does nothing. Its non-doing is its serenity. Earth does nothing. Its non-doing is its rest. From the union of these two non-doings, all actions proceed, all things are made, how vast, how invisible this coming to be. All things come from nowhere, how vast, how invisible, no way to explain it. All beings in their perfection are born of non-doing, hence it is said, heaven and earth do nothing, yet there is nothing they do not do. Where is the man who can attain to this non-doing? All right, we're going to end it there on page 102. Next chapter is Symphony for a Seabird. This is the way of Shuangzi. If we were as intent upon our own business as the old fellows at Rome are upon what interests them, we too might perhaps accomplish something. I know a man older than I am, now superintendent of the corn market at Rome. If we were as the old fellows at Rome are upon what interests them, we too might perhaps accomplish something. I know a man older than I am, now superintendent of the corn market at Rome. And I remember when he passed through this place on his way back from exile, what an account he gave me of his former life, declaring that for future, once home again, his only care should be to pass his remaining years in quiet and tranquility. For how few years have I left, he cried, that I said you will not do, but the moment the scent of Rome is in your nostrils, you will forget it all, and if you can but gain admission to court, you'll be glad enough to elbow your way in, and thank God for it. Epictetus, he replied, if you ever find me setting as much as 1 foot within the court, think what you will of me. Well, as it was, what did he do ere ever he entered the city? He was met by a dispatch from the emperor. He took it and forgot the whole of his resolutions. From that moment he has been piling one thing upon another. I should like to be beside him to remind him of what he said when passing this way, and to add how much better a prophet I am than you. What then? Do I say man is not made for an active life? Far from it, but there is a great difference between other men's occupations and ours. A glance at those will make it clear to you all day long. They do nothing but calculate, contrive, consult how to wring their profit out of foodstuffs, farm plots, and the like. Whereas I entreat you to learn what the administration of the world is, and what place a being endowed with reason holds therein, to consider what you are yourself, and wherein your good and evil consists. A man asked me to write to Rome on his behalf, who, as most people thought, had met with misfortune, for having been before wealthy and distinguished, he had afterwards lost all and was living here. So I wrote about him in a humble style. He, however, on reading the letter, returned it to me with the words, I asked for your help, not for your pity. No evil has happened unto me. True instruction is this, to learn to wish that each thing should come to pass as it does. And how does it come to pass? As the disposer has disposed it. Now he has disposed that there should be summer and winter, plenty and dearth, and vice and virtue, and all such opposites for the harmony of the whole. Have this thought ever present with thee, when thou losest any outward thing, what thou gainest in its stead. And if this be the more precious, say not, I have suffered loss. Concerning the gods, there are who deny the very existence of the Godhead. Others say that it exists, but neither bestirs nor concerns itself, nor has forethought for anything. Third party attribute to it existence and forethought. but only for great and heavenly matters, not for anything that is on earth. A fourth party admit things on earth as well as in heaven, but only in general, and not with respect to each individual. A fifth of whom were Ulysses and Socrates, are those that cry, I move not without thy knowledge. Considering all these things, the good and true man submits his judgment to him that administers the universe, even as good citizens, to the law of the state. And he that is being instructed should come thus minded, how may I in all things follow the gods? And how may I satisfied with the divine administration? And how may I become free? For he is free for whom all things come to pass, according to his will, and whom none can hinder. What then is freedom? Madness? God forbid, for madness and freedom exist not together. But I wish all that I desire to come to pass, and in the manner that I desire. You are mad, you are beside yourself. Know you not that freedom is a glorious thing and of great worth? But that what I desired at random, I should wish at random to come to pass, so far from being noble, may well be exceeding base. You must know that it is no easy thing for a principle to become a man's own unless each day he maintained it and hear it maintained, as well as work it out in life. You are impatient and hard to please. If alone you call it solitude, if in the company of men you dub them conspirators and thieves and find fault with your very parents, children, brothers, and neighbors, whereas when by yourself you should have called it tranquility and freedom, and herein deemed yourself like unto the gods. And when in the company of the many you should not have called it a wearisome crowd and tumult, but an assembly and a tribunal, and thus accepted all with contentment. What then is the chastisement of those who accept it? Not to be as they are. Is any discontented with being alone? Let him be in solitude. Is any discontented with his parents? Let him be a bad son and lament. Is any discontented with his children? Let him be a bad father. Throw him into prison. What prison? Where he is already, for he is there against his will. And wherever a man is against his will, there to him is a prison. Now Socrates was not in prison, since he was there with his own consent. Knowing thou what speck thou art in comparison with the universe? That is, with respect to the body, since with respect to reason, thou art not inferior to the gods, no less than they. For the greatness of reason is not measured by length or height, but by the resolves of the mind. Place then thy happiness in that wherein thou art equal to the gods. Asked how a man might eat acceptably to the gods, Epictetus replied, if when he eats he can be just, cheerful, equable, temperate, and orderly, can he not thus eat acceptably to the gods? But when you call for warm water, and your slave does not answer, or when he enters brings it lukewarm, or is not even found to be in the house at all, then not to be vexed or burst with anger, is not that acceptable to the gods? But how can one endure such people? Slave, will you not endure your own brother, that has got you his forefather, even as a son sprung from the same stock, and of the same high descent as yourself? And if you are stationed in a high position, are you therefore forthwith to set up for a tyrant? Remember who you are and whom you rule, that they are by nature your kinsmen, your brothers, the offspring of God. But I pay price for them, not they for me. Do you see whither you are looking? Down to the earth, to the pie, to the pit, to those despicable laws of the dead? But to the laws of the gods you do not look. When we are invited to a banquet, we take what is set before us, and were one to call upon his host to set fish upon the table, or sweet things, he would be deemed absurd. If in a word we ask the gods for what they do not give, and that although they have given us so many things. Asked how a man might convince himself that every single act of this was under the eye of God, Epictetus answered, do you not hold that all things are bound together in one? I do. Well, and do you not hold that things on earth and things in heaven are continuous and in unison with each other? I do, was the reply. Else how should the trees so regularly, as though by God's command, at his bidding flower, at his bidding send forth shoots, bear fruit and ripen it, at his bidding let it fall and shed their leaves, folded up upon themselves lie in quietness and rest? How else as the moon waxes and wanes, as the sun approaches and recedes, can it be that such vicissitude and alternation is seen in earthly things? If then all things that grow, nay, our own bodies are thus bound up with the whole, is it not this still truer of the souls? And if our souls are bound up and in contact with God as being very parts and fragments plucked from himself, shall he not feel every movement of theirs as though it were his own, and belonging to his own nature? But you say, I cannot comprehend all this at once. Why, who told you that your powers were equal to God's? Yet God hath placed by the side of each a man's own guardian spirit. To the Stoics, the guardian spirit was each man's reason, who is charged to watch over him, the guardian who sleeps, nor is deceived. For to what better or more watchful guardian could he have committed each of us? So when you have shut the doors and made a darkness within, remember never to say that you are alone, for you are not alone, but God is within, and your guardian spirit. What light do they need to behold what you do? To this God you also should have sworn allegiance, even as soldiers under Caesar. They, when their service is hired, swear to hold the life of Caesar dearer than all else. And will you not swear your oath that are deemed worthy of so many and great gifts? And will you not keep your oath when you have sworn it? And what oath will you swear? Never to disobey, never to arraign or murmur at aught that comes to you from his hand, never unwillingly to do or suffer aught that necessity lays upon you. Is this oath like theirs? They swear to hold no other dearer than Caesar, you to hold our true selves dearer than all else beside. How shall my brother cease to be wroth with me? Bring him to me, and I will tell him, but to thee I have nothing to say about his anger. When one took counsel of Epictetus, saying, what I seek is this, how even though my brother be not reconciled to me, I may still remain as nature would have me to be. He replied, all great things are slow of growth. Nay, this is true even of a grape or of a fig. If then you say to me now, I desire a fig, I shall answer, it needs time. Wait till it first flower, then cast its blossom, then ripen. Whereas when the fruit of the fig tree reaches not maturity suddenly, nor yet in a single hour, do you nevertheless desire so quickly and easily to reap the fruit of the mind of man? Nay, expect it not even though I bade you. Epaphroditus had a shoemaker whom he sold as being good for nothing. This fellow by some accident was afterwards purchased by one of Caesar's men, and became shoemaker to Caesar. You should have seen what respect Epaphroditus paid him then. How does the good Felicion kindly let me know? And if any of us inquired, what is Epaphroditus doing? The answer was, he is consulting about so-and-so with Felicion. Had he not sold him as good for nothing, who had in a trice converted him into a wiseacre? This is what comes of holding of importance anything but the things that depend on will. What you shun enduring yourself, attempt not to impose on others. You shun slavery. Beware of enslaving others. If you can endure to do that, one would think you had been once upon a time a slave yourself. For vice has nothing in common with virtue, nor freedom with slavery. Has a man been raised to the tribuneship? Every one that he meets congratulates him. One kisses him on the eyes, another on the neck, while the slaves kiss his hands. He goes home to find torches burning. He sends to the capital to sacrifice. Whoever sacrificed for having had right desires, for having conceived such inclinations as nature would have him. In truth, we thank the gods for that wherein we place our happiness. A man was talking to me today about the priesthood of Augustus. I said to him, let the thing go, my good sir. You will spend a great deal to no purpose. Well, but my name will be inserted in all the documents and contracts. Will you be standing there to tell those that read them, that is my name written there? And even though you could now be there in every case, what will you do when you are dead? At all events, my name will remain. Inscribe it on a stone, and it will remain just as well, and think beyond Nicopolis what memory of you will there be. But I shall have a golden wreath to wear. If you must have a wreath, get a wreath of roses and put it on. You will look more elegant. Above all, remember that the door stands open. Be not more fearful than children, but as they, when they weary of the game, cry, I will play no more. Even so, when thou art in the like case, cry, I will play no more and depart. But if thou stayest, make no lamentation. Is there smoke in the room? If it be slight, I remain. If grievous, I quit it. For you must remember this and hold it fast. The door stands open. You should not dwell at Nicopolis, well and good, nor at Athens. And I will not dwell at Athens either, nor at Rome either. You shall dwell in Gyara. Well, but to dwell in Gyara seems to me like a grievous smoke. Depart to a place where none can forbid me to dwell. That habitation is open to all. For as for the last garment of all, that is the poor body. Beyond that, none cannot do aught unto me. This is why Demetrius said to Nero, you threaten me with death, but it is nature who threatens you. The beginning of philosophy is to know the condition of one's own mind. If a man recognizes that this is in a weakly state, he will not then want to apply it to questions of the greatest moment. As it is, men who are not fit to swallow even a morsel buy whole treatises and try to devour them. Accordingly, they either vomit them up again or suffer from indigestion, whence come gripings, fluxions, and fevers, whereas they should have stopped to consider their capacity. In theory, it is easy to convince an ignorant person. In actual life, men not only object to offer themselves to be convinced, but hate the man who has convinced them. Whereas Socrates used to say that we should never lead a life not subjected to examination. This is the reason why Socrates, when reminded that he should prepare for his trial, answered, thinkest thou not that I have been preparing for it all my life? In what way I have maintained that which in me lay? How so? I have never secretly, openly done wrong unto any. In what character dost thou now come forward? As a witness summoned by God. Come thou, saith God, and testify for me, for thou art worthy of being brought forward as a witness by me. Is aught that is outside thy will either good or bad? Do I hurt any man? Have I placed the good of each in the power of any other than himself? What witness dost thou bear to God? I am in evil state, master, I am undone. None careth for me, none giveth me aught. All men blame or speak evil of me. Is this the witness thou wilt bear and do dishonour to the calling wherewith he hath called thee? Because he hath done thee so great honour, and deemed thee worthy of being summoned to bear witness in so great a cause? Wouldst thou have men speak good of thee? Speak good of them. And when thou hast learned to speak good of them, try to do good unto them, and thus thou wilt reap in return their speaking good of thee. When thou goest into any of the great, remember that another from above sees what is passing, and that thou shouldest please him rather than man. He therefore asks thee, is this in the schools? What didst thou call exile, imprisonment, bonds, death, and shame? I call them different things, and I call them things indifferent. What then dost thou call them now? Are they at all changed? No. It is then thou that art changed? No. Say then, what are things indifferent? Things that are not in our power. Say then what follows, that things which are not in our power are nothing to me. Say also what things you hold to be good, a will such as it ought to be, and a right use of the things of sense. And what is the end? To follow thee. That Socrates should ever have been so treated by the Athenians, slave. Why say Socrates? Speak of the thing as it is. That ever then the poor body of Socrates should have been dragged away and haled by main force to prison. That ever hemlock should have been given to the body of Socrates. That should have breathed its life away. Do you marvel at this? Do you hold this unjust? Is it for this that you accuse God? Had Socrates no compensation for this? Where then for him was the ideal good? Whom shall we hearken to, you or him? And what says he? Anytus and Miletus may put me to death, to injure me is beyond their power. And again, if such be the will of God, so let it be. Nay, young man, for heaven's sake, but once thou hast heard these words, go home and say to thyself, it is not Epictetus that has told me these things, how indeed should he? No, it is some gracious God through him, else it would never have entered his head to tell me them. He that is not used to speak to any one of us, well then let us not lie under the wrath of God, but be obedient unto him. Nay, indeed, but if a raven by its croaking bears thee any sign, it is not the raven, but God that sends the sign through the raven. And if he signifies anything to thee through human voice, will he not cause the man to say these words to thee, that thou mayest know the power of the divine? How he sends a sign to some in one way, and to others in another, and on the greatest and highest matters of all signifies his will through the noblest messenger. What else does the poet mean? I spake unto him erst myself, and sent Hermes in the shining, one to check and warn him, the husband not to slay, nor woo the wife. In the same way, my friend Heraclitus, who had a trifling suit about a petty farm at Rhodes, first showed the judges that his cause was just, and then at the finish cried, I will not entreat you, nor do I care what sentence you pass. It is you who are on your trial, not I. And so he ended the case. As for us, we behave like a herd of deer. When they flee from the huntsman's feathers in affright, which way do they turn? What haven of safety do they make for? Why, they rush upon the nets, and thus they perish by confounding what they should fear with that wherein no danger lies. Not death or pain is to be feared, but the fear of death or pain. Well said the poet, therefore, death has no terror, only a death of shame. How is it then that certain external things are said to be natural, and others contrary to nature? Why, just as it might be said, if we stood alone and apart from others, a foot, for instance, I will allow it is natural should be clean, but if you take it as a foot, and as a thing which does not stand by itself, it will beseem it, if need be, to walk in the mud, to tread on thorns, and sometimes even to be cut off, for the benefit of the whole body. Else it is no longer a foot. In some such way we should conceive of ourselves also. What art thou, man? Looked at as standing by thyself and separate, it is natural for thee in health and wealth long to live. But looked at as a man, and only as a part of a whole, it is for that whole's sake that thou shouldst at one time fall sick, at another brave the perils of the sea again, know the meaning of want, and perhaps die an early death. Why then repine? Knowest thou not that as the foot is no more a foot if detached from the body, so thou in like case art no longer a man? For what is a man? A part of a city. First of the city of God's out of men. Next of that which ranks nearest it, a miniature of the universal city. In such a body, in such a world enveloping us, among lives like these, such things must happen to one or another. Thy part then being there is to speak of these things as is meet, and to order them as befits the matter. That was a good reply which Diogenes made to a man who asked him for letters of recommendation. That you are a man, he will know when he sees you whether a good or a bad one. He will know if he has any skill in discerning the good and the bad. But if he has none, he will never know, though I write to him 1,000 times. It is as though a piece of silver money desired to be recommended to someone to be tested. If the man be a good judge of silver, he will know, the coin will tell its own tale. Even as the traveller asks his way of him that he meets inclined in no wise to bear to the right rather than to the left, for he desires only the way leading whither he would go, so should we come unto God as to a guide, even as we use our eyes without admonishing them, to show us some things rather than others, but content to receive the images of such things as they present unto us. But as it is, we stand anxiously watching the victim, and with the voice of supplication call upon the augur, Master, have mercy on me, vouchsafe unto me a way of escape. Slave, would you then have aught else than what is best? Is there anything better than what is God's good pleasure? Why, as far as in you lies, would you corrupt your judge and lead your counselor astray? God is beneficent, but the good also is beneficent. It should seem then that where the real nature of God is, there too is to be found the real nature of the good. But that is the real nature of God, intelligence, knowledge, right, reason. Here then, without more ado, seek the real nature of the good. Surely thou dost not seek it in a plant or in an animal that reasoneth not. Seek then the real nature of the good in that without whose presence thou wilt not admit the good to exist in aught else. What then? Are not these other things also works of God? They are, but not preferred to honor, nor are they portions of God. But thou art a thing preferred to honor, thou art thyself a fragment torn from God. Thou hast a portion of him within thyself. How is it then that thou dost not know thy high descent, dost not know whence thou comest? Dost not know whence thou comest? When thou eatest, wilt thou not remember who thou art that eatest, and whom thou feedest? In intercourse, in exercise, in discussion, knowest thou not that it is a God whom thou feedest, a God whom thou exercisest, a God whom thou bearest about with thee, O miserable? And thou perceivest it not. Thinkest thou that I speak of a God of silver or gold, that is without thee? Nay, thou bearest him within thee, all unconscious of polluting him with thoughts impure and unclean deeds, were an image of God present. Thou wouldst not dare to act as thou dost, yet when God himself is present within thee, beholding and hearing all, thou dost not blush to think that such thoughts and do such deeds. O thou that art insensible of thine own nature, and liest under the wrath of God! Why then are we afraid when we send a young man from the schools into active life, lest he should indulge his appetites intemperately, lest he should debase himself by ragged clothing, or be puffed up by fine raiment? Knowest he not the God within him? Knowest he not with whom he is starting on his way? Have we patience to hear him say to us, Would I had thee within me? Hast thou not God where thou art? And having him, dost thou still seek for any other? Would he tell thee also what else than these things? Why wert thou a statue of Phidias and Athena, or Zeus? Thou wouldst bethink thee both of thyself and thine artificer. And hadst thou any sense, thou wouldst strive to do no dishonor to thyself or him that fashioned thee, nor appear to beholders in unbefitting guise. But now because God is thy maker, is that why thou carest not of what sort thou shalt know thyself to be. Yet how different the artists and their workmanship. What human artist's work, for example, has in the faculties that are displayed in fashioning it. Is it aught but marble, bronze, gold, or ivory? Nay, when the Athena of Phidias has put forth her hand and received therein a victory. In that attitude she stands for evermore. But God's works move and breathe, they use and judge the things of sense, the workmanship of such an artist. Wilt thou dishonor him? Aye, when he not only fashioned thee, but placed thee like a ward in the care and guardianship of thyself alone, wilt thou not only forget this, but also do dishonor to what is committed to thy care? If God had entrusted thee with an orphan, wouldst thou have thus neglected him? He hath delivered thee to thine own care, saying, I had none more faithful than myself. Keep this man for me, such as nature hath made him, modest, faithful, high-minded, a stranger to fear, to passion, to perturbation. Such will I show myself to you all, but exempt from sickness also, from age, from death. Nay, but accepting sickness, accepting death as becomes a god. No labor, according to Diogenes, is good, but that which aims at producing courage and strength of soul, rather than of body. A guide on finding a man who has lost his way brings him back to the right path. He does not mock and jeer at him and then take himself off. You also must show the unlearned man the truth, and you will see that he will follow, but so long as you do not show it to him. You should not mock, but rather feel your own incapacity. It was the first and most striking characteristic of Socrates never to become heated in discourse. never to utter an injurious or insulting word. On the contrary, he persistently bore insult from others, and thus put an end to the fray. If you care to know the extent of his power in this direction, read Xenophon's Banquet, and you will see how many quarrels he put an end to. That is why the poets are right in so highly commending this faculty. Quickly and wisely, with all, even bitter feuds, would he settle. Nevertheless, the practice is not very safe at present, especially in Rome. One who adopts it, I need not say, ought not to carry it out in an obscure corner, but boldly accost, if occasion serve some personage of rank or wealth. Can you tell me, sir, to whose care you entrust your horses? I can. Is it to the first comer who knows nothing about them? Certainly not. Well, what of the man who takes care of your gold, your silver, or your raiment? He must be experienced also. And your body? Have you ever considered about entrusting it to anyone's care? Of course I have. And no doubt to a person of experience, as a trainer, a physician, surely. Are these things the best you possess, or have you anything more precious? What can you mean? I mean, that which employs thee, which weighs all things, which takes counsel and resolve. Oh, you mean the soul. You take me rightly, I do mean the soul. By heaven, I held that far more precious than all else I possess. Can you show me, then, what care you bestow on the soul? For it can scarcely be thought that a man of your wisdom and consideration in the city would suffer your most precious possession to go to ruin through carelessness and neglect. Certainly not. Well, do you take care of it yourself? Did anyone teach you the right method, or did you discover it yourself? Now here comes in the danger. First, the great man may answer, why, what is it that to you, my good fellow? Are you my master? And then, if you persist in troubling him, may raise his hand to strike you. It is a practice of which I was myself warm admirer, until such experiences as these befell me. When a youth was giving himself airs in the theatre, and saying, I am wise, for I have conversed with many wise, Epictetus replied, I too have conversed with many rich men, yet I am not rich. We see that a carpenter becomes a carpenter by learning certain things, like that of a pilot. By learning certain things becomes a pilot. Possibly also in the present case, the mere desire to be wise and good is not enough. It is necessary to learn certain things. Is then the object of our search. The philosophers would have us first learn that there is a God, and that his providence directs the universe. Further, that to hide from him not only one's acts, but even one's thoughts and intentions is impossible. Secondly, what the nature of God is, whatever the nature is discovered to be, the man at ease and his might made likened to him. If the divine is faithful, he also must be faithful. If free, he also must be free. If beneficent, he also must be beneficent. If magnanimous, he also must be magnanimous. Thus, as an imitator of God, must he follow him in every deed and word. If I show you that you lack just what is most important and necessary to happiness, that hitherto your attention has been bestowed on everything rather than that which claims it most, and to crown all, that you know neither what God nor man is, neither what God nor evil is, why? That you are ignorant of everything else, perhaps you may bear to be told, but to hear that you know nothing of yourself, how could you submit to that? How could you stand your ground and suffer that to be proved? Clearly not at all. You instantly turn away in wrath. Yet what harm have I done you? Unless indeed the mirror harms the ill-favored man by showing him to himself just as he is, unless the physician can be thought to insult his patient when he... Do you suppose there is nothing new? Why, you have a feast, eat nothing today, and drink only water. Yet no one says what an insufferable man. Your desires are inflamed, your instincts are weak and low, your aims are inconsistent, your impulses are not in harmony with nature, your opinions are rash and false. He forthwith goes away and complains that you have insulted him. Our way of life resembles a fair. The flocks and herds are passing along to be sold, and the greater part of the crowd to buy and sell. But there are some few who come only to look at the fair, to inquire how and why it is being held, upon what authority and with what object. So too, in this great fair of life, some, like the cattle, trouble themselves about nothing but the fodder. Know all of you, who are busied about land, slaves, and public posts, that there are nothing but fodder. Some few things are attending the fair, who love to contemplate what the world is, what he that administers it. Can there be no administrator? Is it possible that while neither city nor household could endure even for a moment without one to administer and see to its welfare, this fabric so fair, so vast, should be administered in order so harmonious, without a purpose, and by blind chance? There is therefore an administrator. What is his nature, and how much and how does he administer? Who are we that are his children, and what work were we born to perform? Have we any close connection or relation with him or not? Such are the impressions of the few of whom I speak, and further they apply themselves solely to considering and examining the great assembly before they depart. While they are derided by the multitude, so are the lookers-on by the traders. Aye, and if the beast had any sense, they would deride those who thought much of anything but fodder. I think I know now what I never knew before, the meaning of the common saying, a fool you can neither bend nor break. Pray heaven I may never have a wise fool for my friend. There is nothing more intractable. My resolve is fixed. Why, so madmen say too, but the more firmly they believe in the delusions, the more they stand in need of treatment. Oh, what shall I see Athens and its Acropolis again? Miserable man, art thou not contented with the daily sights and meet thine eyes? Canst thou behold aught greater or nobler than the sun, moon, and stars? Than the outspread earth and sea? If indeed thou apprehendest him who administers the universe, if thou bearest him about within thee, canst thou still hanker after mere fragments of stone and a fine rock? When thou art about to bid farewell to the sun and moon itself, wilt thou sit down and cry like a child? Why, what didst thou hear? What didst thou learn? Why didst thou write thyself down a philosopher when thou mightest have written what was the fact, namely, I have made 1 or 2 compendiums. I have read some works of Chrysippus, and I have not even touched the hem of philosophy's robe. Friend, lay hold with a desperate grasp ere it is too late on freedom, on tranquility, on greatness of soul. Lift up thy thread, lift up thy head, as one escaped from slavery. Dare to look up to God and say, deal with me henceforth as thou wilt. Thou and I are of one mind. I am thine, I refuse nothing that seemeth good to thee. Be done with, thou wilt clothe me in what garb thou pleasest. Wilt thou have me a ruler or a subject, at home or in exile, poor or rich? All these things will I justify unto men for thee. I will show the true nature of each. Who would Hercules have been had he loitered at home? No Hercules, but Eurystheus. And in his wanderings through the world, how many friends and comrades did he find, but nothing dearer to him than God? Wherefore he was believed to be God's son, as indeed he was. So then, in obedience to him, he went about delivering the earth from injustice and lawlessness. But thou art not Hercules, thou sayest, and canst not deliver others from their iniquity, not even Theseus to deliver the soil of Attica from its monsters. Put away thine own, cast forth thence from thine own mind, not robbers and monsters, but fear, desire, envy, malignity, avarice, effeminacy, intemperance. And these may not be cast out except by looking to God alone, by fixing thy affections on him only, and by consecrating thyself to his commands. If thou choosest aught else with sighs and groans, thou wilt perforce to follow a might greater than thine own, ever seeking tranquility without, and never able to attain unto her. For thou seekest her where she is not to be found, and where she is, there thou seekest her not. If a man would pursue philosophy, his first task is to throw away conceit, for it is impossible for a man to begin to learn what he has a conceit that he already knows. For it is impossible for a man to begin to learn what he has a conceit, that he already knows. Give me but one young man that has come to the school with this intention, who stands forth a champion of this cause, and says, all else I renounce, content if I am but able to pass my life free from hindrance and trouble, to raise my head aloft and face all things as a free man, to look up to heaven and as a friend of God fearing. Nothing that may come to pass. Point out such a one to me, that I may say, enter, young man, into possession of that which is thine own. For thy lot is to adorn philosophy. Thine are these possessions, thine these books, these discourses. And when our champion has duly exercised himself in this part of the subject, I hope he will come back to me and say, what I desire is to be free from passion and from perturbation, as one who grudges no pains in the pursuit of piety and philosophy. What I desire is to know my duty to the gods, my duty to my parents, to my brothers, to my country, to my strangers. Enter then on the second part of the subject. It is thine also, but I have already mastered the second part, only I wish to stand firm and unshaken, as firm when asleep as when awake, as firm when elated as with wine, as in despondency and dejection. Friend, you are verily a god, you cherish great designs. The question at stake, said Epictetus, is no common one. It is this, are we in our senses, or are we not? If you have given way to anger, be sure that over and above the evil involved therein, you have strengthened the habit and added fuel to the fire. If overcome by a temptation of the flesh, do not reckon it a single defeat, but that you have also strengthened your dissolute habits. Habits and faculties are necessarily affected by the corresponding acts. Those that were not there before spring up, the rest gain in strength and extent. This is the account which philosophers give of the origin of diseases of the mind. Suppose you have once lusted after money. If reason sufficient to produce a sense of the evil be applied, then the lust is checked, and the mind at once regains its original authority. Whereas if you have recourse to no remedy, you can no longer look for this return. On the contrary, the next time it is excited by the corresponding object, the flame of desire leaps up more quickly than before. With frequent repetition, the mind in the long run becomes callous, and thus this mental disease produces confirmed avarice. One who has had fever, even when it has left him, is not in the same condition of health as before, unless indeed his cure is complete. Something of the same sort is true also of diseases of the mind. Behind there remains a legacy of traces and of blisters, and unless these are effectually erased, subsequent blows on the same spot will produce no longer mere blisters, but sores. If If you do not wish to be prone to anger, do not feed the habit. Give it nothing which may tend to its increase. At first, keep quiet and count the days when you were not angry. You used to be angry every day, then every other day, next every 2, next every 3 days. And if you succeed in passing 30 days, sacrifice to the gods in thanksgiving. How then may this be attained? Resolve now, if never before, to prove thyself to thyself. Resolve to show thyself fair in God's sight. Long to be pure with thine own pure self and God. That is the true athlete that trains himself to resist such outward impressions as these. Stay, wretched man, suffer not thyself to be carried away. Great is the combat, divine the task. You are fighting for kingship, for liberty, for happiness, for tranquility. Remember God, call upon him to aid thee, like a comrade that stands beside thee in the fight. Who then is a Stoic, in the sense that we call the statue of Phidias, which is modeled after that master's art? Show me a man in this sense modeled after the doctrines that are ever upon his lips. Show me a man that is sick and happy in danger, and happy on his deathbed, and happy in exile, and happy in evil report, and happy. Show me him, I ask again, so help me heaven. I long to see one Stoic. Nay, if you cannot show me one fully modeled, let me at least see one in whom the process is at work, one whose bent is in that direction. Do me that favor, grudge it not to an old man to behold a sight that he has never yet